This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll chat with Rob Harrison of LNS Research about how to properly implement EQMS software. That and more when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for July 10th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest. My co-host, Dirk Ducharme, is on vacation. So let me start the show with a question. Dirk's not here, so I'll ask all of you. What do you think of when you hear the term team player? Now, although many of us likely have a positive association with the term, for certain job applicants, the connotation could be a negative one. And that has implications for those looking to hire qualified employees. According to a new research study from Agnes Baker of the University of Tübingen in Germany, reported by Frank Cavallero on the EBN blog and linked to in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, the term team player shouldn't be used in job postings. At least it shouldn't be used for postings in which the applicant's technical skills are actually more important than their social skills. And of course, that's a lot of jobs in our industry. You see, the problem is that people who are not necessarily what you would consider to be people persons will tend to disqualify themselves for applying for jobs that specifically call out and call for team players. This despite the fact that these potential applicants might, in fact, actually be perfect for said job. Of course, that doesn't mean that companies want to hire folks with antisocial behaviors, but for certain jobs, the ability to work smoothly within a team is actually pretty far down the list of critical qualities. Job seekers read those postings carefully, and they really think about the words that are included therein. So if you're hiring, if you're in the process of putting together a job posting, you better think twice about everything you say in there and consider getting rid of filler such as team player, unless that job really calls for that skill. That's really good advice. I mean, there tends to be a lot of filler in job postings. You know, things like team player, people throw in there, well, of course we want a team player, right? I mean, can't hurt. Well, this research says maybe it can, because if people are kind of self-excluding themselves, not qualifying themselves because they see that and think, well, gosh, I'm a great technologically, and I know I can do everything this job calls for, but I like to work by myself. You know, I'm not so great interacting with people or clients or whatever it may be, however they may interpret that. Again, you may not get that person. Maybe that person is the one that you want for the job. So it's really good advice there. Again, if you're going to be thinking about having a job posting, make sure you throw that out there and don't include team player if you don't really need it. Okay, well, we're going to move on now to our features of this week. And if you follow us on this show, or if you read our daily newsletter, if you visit our website at www.qualitydigest.com, you know that we cover enterprise quality management software, or EQMS, on a regular basis. That's because EQMS is a powerful solution to the complex problems facing any quality-centric organization. So whether it's supplier management, corrective and preventive action, document control, or dozens of other functions, a good EQMS system is going to allow quality to flow across the entire enterprise, even one that has locations in different continents across the globe. Our first guest today has a great high-level perspective on EQMS. As an analyst at LNS Research, he has developed some interesting insights into what makes a successful EQMS system. His latest article, 4 Steps to Get Your EQMS Implementation Right from Day One, appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, and it delves into that very topic. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Rob Harrison to the show. Rob, thank you for joining us.
Hello, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. And as I mentioned, we certainly cover EQMS often here at Quality Digest. We know it's important for the industry, for our readers. So let's kind of jump into it. And maybe you can start by giving us a little bit of background on your company, on LNS Research. What exactly does LNS Research do, and how do you guys fit into the EQMS world?
Sure. So LNS is a technology research firm, and we help clients innovate and ultimately achieve operational excellence. So we have a group of experienced analysts across multiple practices. Actually, they include asset performance management, manufacturing operations management, environment, health, safety, and sustainability, quality management, of course, and also the industrial Internet of Things. So a broad and varied collection of practices there, but with a lot of interrelations there that, of course, allow us to give the bigger picture and also spend time identifying what's coming over the horizons for our stakeholders. We conduct a lot of primary research, and that's based on our social research model. We have a multi-year survey, which approaching 2,000 quality executives have responded to. We have deep industry contacts where we work with our global executive council, approaching 50 execs on that represent organizations, many brands of which you'd be very familiar with. We take all of that, of course, and that information. We provide very rich interactive data visualizations for organizations to then go in and interrogate the data that we capture.
So that's a really good overview, and I think it leads to this question. You do this work and you talk to all these users, and that's an impressive amount of people in this space. So I'm sure you find a lot of commonalities in those respondents. So what do you hear frequently regarding pain points in EQMS implementation?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, the answer is consistently we see fragmentation, we see disconnected tools and data across organizations. Of course, the larger, the broader the organization, the more disruptive events that they've experienced, large mergers, acquisitions, etc. Those kind of things really get in the way of a fluid approach to quality management. But we also experience organizations. Some are quite surprising, given their stature as organizations, that have limited formal processes that stretch across a single facility to multiple facilities and roll up the entire organization. For example, significant issues with lack of visibility into supplier quality, and many issues actually that stretch across the value chain, from suppliers right the way out through to sales and field and warranty management, for example. So many common issues, and it's actually very consistent.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your article, you address 4 specific things that users have to do to properly implement their EQMS system. So if you don't mind, maybe you can take a few moments and maybe quickly run through those 4 very important points for us.
Absolutely, and from the highest level, really, what we're talking about is scoping the project from the very outset. The project charter really is a defining document that serves many purposes. We do go into that in some depth. Of course, building a cross-functional team to ensure that you get the appropriate perspectives, subject matter expertise, the strategic as well as tactical views, and that includes, top floor to shop floor representation. And we talk a lot in detail, some very specific points with regards to the cross-functional team. IT, as you'd expect with an enterprise deployment of this nature, play a very important part, but they're analogous really to the organization, or you or I buying a house, for example. IT are our building inspector. They don't necessarily deal with the everyday, decisions we might make around, taste and how we might use space. But we absolutely want to know that the foundations are solid. Additional utilities can be brought in, and that's synonymous with integration for EQMS with other platforms, all the way through to finance and ensuring that supplier chargebacks can be appropriately managed. We're talking about closing the loop across the value chain with regards to the approach to quality management. So that's a very important point. Requirements, the third point, of course, very important to get your requirements right, but you can go too deep, not quite deep enough, and the way that they're presented needs to be done in a very consistent manner. Quality leaders don't go through the selection of EQMS on a regular basis. This is something they might do 1, 2, or 3 times in an entire career. This is a long-term investment, so we have to get it right out of the gate. That's very important, of course. And then the way that demonstrations are conducted. Vendors are very sophisticated, and they have innovated and have very sophisticated tools out there. But what you want to know is that the way that you approach your processes is accommodated appropriately, and that there's appropriate configuration and freedom to expand beyond that and not have to be shoehorned into a particular way of working, for example. Many facets, and we're really focusing with this research on getting selection right, because as one exec in a $5 billion CPG company articulated the other day, the tool's the glue that holds all of this together. There are other elements like culture, but getting the tool right is something that you would pay a very high price for in the long term if indeed you make mistakes.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Touching back on what you just mentioned, at the end of the article you said that the 4 steps you just reviewed for us, they tend to interrelate and overlap. So how does this play out? And again, you touched on this a little bit, but for example, how does scoping the project affect the selection of the team members who are going to be helping you hammer out those requirements?
Again, this is back to subject matter expertise and also perception, but it does go a bit further than that. So, we want representation from our quality engineers. We want representation from finance. We want to view every single perspective. Now, it doesn't mean that we're absolutely going to accommodate every single nuance across every single region, every individual facility. We're still trying to harmonize a process, but we need those perspectives to make the right decisions. But it also goes beyond that. The interrelation goes all the way into these individuals being our evangelists. They're fully informed, back to the project charter. They know exactly why we're doing this. They know that it underpins, some cultural transformation as well. Fundamentally, these people are going to take the word out to the field, let everyone know what's coming. They're also responsible for some elements of organizational readiness, and then they'll be the champions and perhaps even first-line support going forward. So the interrelated nature of scoping, being involved in scoping, and then, of course, seeing that all the way through to what effectively could be a multi-year journey is very important to get right. And being connected and knowing and good communication across that is very, very important.
No doubt. Well, Rob, you're very well spoken on this topic, and thank you for giving us a really great overview on the do's and don'ts of EQMS implementation. I, of course, want to remind everyone that you and our very own Director Sharm, you're going to be presenting a free webinar on this topic titled EQMS Solution Selection Best Practices for Global Enterprises. People can see it on the screen right there. The webinar happens this coming Tuesday, July 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So, Rob, I guess we're going to see you on Tuesday for a lot more on this very important and timely topic. So, thanks for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to it. Thank you, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And for all of you who want to register for that event, it's going to be a good one. Again, Rob's going to host it. Dirk Sharm's going to host it. Rob's going to present on this topic. And if you want to check it out, again, in Rob's article, again, right below the video player screen, we have all the articles we've covered on today's show. Right below the video player screen right there is Rob's article. You can click out to that article, and then in the article is a link where you can register for the webinar. Also, keep an eye on your inbox, your email inbox. We're going to be sending out a reminder about this as well early part of next week. So check that out and make sure if you have anything to do with EQMS, make sure you check out that webinar next Tuesday. Okay, well, for our next feature, we're going to turn to the story of a true philosopher of quality. And that's one of my favorite terms, philosopher of quality, because these gurus, these people we're talking about, really, in my mind, truly are philosophers of our practice. And the man I'm talking about is Eli Goldratt. In his article, Precisely Wrong, appearing in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, frequent QD contributor Bruce Hamilton marks the 4-year anniversary of Goldratt's passing, which occurred on June 11th, 2011, when Eli Goldratt was just 64, just 64 years old. So we lost him early. There's a picture of him right there with his ever-present cigar. And Eli Goldratt, in case any of you don't know, he was a truly remarkable figure. And I actually learned a lot about him from reading this article from Bruce and doing some more research on him. Truly remarkable figure. He was an Israeli-born and Israeli-educated physicist by training. Goldratt's PhD thesis was on queuing theory. Kind of interesting how this fits. Queuing theory, of course, uses mathematics to construct models that can predict things like the lengths of time that people wait in lines and wait times too. Wait times, how lines queue up and how they dissipate, things like that. So this led Goldratt to his signature insight, which he coined as the theory of constraints, which he announced to the world in his very well-known 1984 book titled The Goal. Theory of constraints, or better known as TOC, boiled down to its simplest definition, attempts to first identify and then eliminate the small number of obstacles or constraints that typically prevent organizations from achieving their goals. That's why he called his book The Goal. The goal, of course, is to have ever-present, ongoing, continuous improvement. Goldratt stressed that the key measurements to be controlled if organizations wish to improve are throughput, operational expense, and inventory. So think about those three things: throughput, operational expense, and inventory. Well, I think if you think about those three things and you think about Bruce Hamilton, I think you'll see the affinity that an old lean dude like Bruce has for Eli Goldratt. The theory of constraints beautifully underlines and supports the lean approach to continuous improvement. Both systems, and really I think the argument is that they're really one system from different perspectives, have as their mortal enemies standard cost accounting, which, as Goldratt once personally told Hamilton, is precisely wrong, title of the article. Accounting on the basis of cost, of course, is a backward-facing measure. It's been shown to destroy lean initiatives faster than most anything else. I mean, the reason that Goldratt said it was precisely wrong is that standard cost accounting is very, very precise. And Bruce talks about this in the article as well, that they would account for their overhead, for instance, in up to 4 decimal places. And it was very, very accurate, but the problem is it's backward facing. Lean, of course, is a forward moving imperative. And if you want to improve in real time, if you want to increase things like throughput and flow, standard cost accounting is really not where you want to go. So the moral of the story is that Eli Goldratt was, in many ways, a man ahead of his time, working independently yet reaching many of the same conclusions as the founders of the Toyota production system. TPS and TOC, as Hamilton writes, were once seen by many as competitive systems, but in fact, the theoretical underpinnings were mostly in concert. Like great lean practitioners, Goldratt focused deeply on the root causes of poor performance. Whether the constraints were behavioral, logistical, or managerial, in other words, policy-based in nature, Goldratt sought to identify and eliminate them as barriers to performance improvement. Again, same thing lean does. I mean, you identify what's holding you back and you quickly try to improve that. It's really the theory behind the Kaizen blitz. Eli Goldratt did not come to his conclusions from firsthand experience in factories. In fact, as Hamilton points out, he never worked a day in his life on a shop floor. But the man understood how systems worked, or in this case, didn't work. And for that and his perceptive insights into improvement, I think he deserves to be remembered. So thanks, Bruce, for reminding us all about Goldratt's work and his achievements. And for all of you who want to read more, be sure to check out Hamilton's article, which again is titled Precisely Wrong. And again, as always, the link can be found right below this video player screen right down there. You can read more, as I did, about Eli Goldratt. Really, really important seminal figure in our industry, and I think one that all of us should really give a close reading to. The goal is, by the way, if you haven't read it, you should read it. It's a dense read. It's very, very packed with information. It's a little difficult to get through, but really well worth it, because this was really breakthrough stuff, talking about what theory of constraints mean. And if you're having problems in your organization, on your manufacturing floor in particular, understanding theory of constraints and going after those things that are constraining you first can really help you improve very, very quickly. So that's a really good read, really good advice there from Bruce Hamilton. Okay, well, for our final segment of the day, we're going to turn to a little organizational psychology. And one of the things that we really like doing here at Quality Digest is to present new voices to you that have unique insights. And when those new voices quickly become among our most popular authors, well, that's just gravy. That's all the better. Our next guest, Kelly Graves, is the author of a multi-part series on the building blocks of organizational psychology that has appeared in Quality Digest Daily over the past few months. We published his latest article, 10 Steps to Better Executing Your Strategic Plans, on June 30th. So, Kelly, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Great to be here, Mike.
How you been?
I've been doing great.
Good, good. You look good. It's hot here in Chico, though.
It is. It's hot here in this room, but it's cooler than it was last week. I'll take
true.
Anything under 100.
I think we had 109 last week. Is that what it was? Something like that. So it was warm, yeah, but it's all right. Yeah. So good to see you. Well, let's start with strategy. Okay. And you talked about strategy in your piece, which I thought was really interesting. Right. Why does strategy, big S, capital S, why does strategy, you think, why does it intimidate people? What is it about that makes people kind of close up a little bit?
I don't know if strategy itself closes up people or even makes them nervous. I think strategy, any kind of planning, people do very easily, much like the New Year's resolution, where we all make them, and very few people play them out. And I'll give you an example. I go to the gym 3 or 4 days a week. Try to. Most of the time, 3 or 4 days a week. And what I run into every year is that January 1st, you've got a ton of people through January, and about February, early to mid-February, it fades out. And what I've experienced over the course of 15 years doing this, The same 6 weeks process happens when people return from a strategic planning meeting. They have good intentions, but firefighting mode takes over. They find other things that are more important, and then they realize this is work. What they've done is they've planned the strategy, but they haven't planned the steps to implement the strategy. Behaviors are totally different than plans, and that's where it really starts breaking up.
And is fear a part of that, you think? I mean, it always seems to me that when we talk about your work and we look at the stuff you publish, there's always this underlying idea that people are fearful of change, and they're fearful of tackling strategy. You think that's part of it too?
It is. Fear of change, everybody fears change, and I think that's where, if you've read any of my stuff before, I talk consistently about communication. And that's where, real quickly, we have to let people know what is the strategy. Most of the time, the executive team knows what it is, and maybe one layer below that knows some of the pieces, but if you were to walk around the average organization and say, what is our strategic plan?
Right.
They wouldn't have any idea, and that's why I put in the article, if you don't have a clear strategic plan that everyone understands, you don't have a plan. Right. You have an illusion.
Work your plan and plan your work, right? Isn't that what you mentioned at the beginning of the article?
Exactly, but people don't do that. And that's where I believe that you need to start with, one, what are you going to give up? What are the 5 things that you're going to work on for this year? And knowing that most people have 500 things on their list, or let's say 100, let's use 100. What are the bottom 20 that you're going to not do? And when I ask that to the executive teams, they struggle with that. And if they struggle with that they're never going to be able to do that once they get back to the office. So being very clear, what are the 20 things that we're going to drop, that we're not going to do anymore? What are the 5 things that we're going to focus on? And then most importantly, what are we going to do Monday morning? So just like when you go to college, you don't think about the semester because you'll be overwhelmed.
Sure.
But when we look at the syllabus, what am I going to do every week? And if I each week say I'm going to do this piece, each week the semester takes care of itself. And the same thing happens with strategic plans. But the thing that we've got to focus on with people are the behaviors. How are you and I going to implement this, and how are we going to change? And that's where the fear comes in. I don't want to change. I'm fearful of change because it's an unknown. Where when we can talk about what the end goal looks like, how that's going to help us, that's the destination. And then if we can tell them this is what the journey looks like, then that helps them go through the steps of change and the behavioral change, and especially when you involve them in the process of change.
And it's not just workers, the people that are following the leaders that need this help. I mean, you talk in there about how leaders tend to chop up into 3 different groups, and how they handle this idea of strategy. Can you talk about that? I thought that was really interesting.
It is. I've ran into this so much over the years. It cracks me up. So we'll take an average organization, $100,000 a year organization, and you've got a couple hundred employees. You've got the executives. They've been there. Let's say there's 7 of them. And what I've noticed is you've got 3 or 4 that are really into it. We're going to make these changes. And they're really going to try this year. And then you've got 2 or 3 that know that, the last 20 years it's been flavor of the month. It usually fades after a while. So I'm going to kind of watch the group and see what they do. And then you've got the last 2 or 3, I'll call those the prisoners, and they're the ones that in their mind they're going, we shouldn't be doing this, it's a waste of time, we haven't implemented it in the last 10 years, I'm not even going to try it. I'm just going to go do my thing because it's more important than what this stuff is. And these are the things that I'm going to be being graded on, is getting this product done, not implementing this new so-called solution. And that's where I believe that when you're doing the strategic planning, whoever's facilitating that for you, you need to have some real honest conversations. One, are we or aren't we? And I break it down to something very simple. If you were to ask me to lose 20 pounds, or let's do 30 pounds, significant, and I say, I've tried that, I can't. I think that if you were to say, Kelly, you need to lose 30 pounds in the next 6 months or you're going to die. That's okay. Now it's like, okay, I don't want to get up early and I would like to have that donut, but I don't want to die. So now I'm very motivated to. Okay, so it's not a question of do I want to, can I, can't I? It's that I don't want to go through the uncomfortableness of change. And I think that's where people need to plan the change process better, the behavioral process. Involve the people. I say that 1,000 times. You need to involve them. And then break it down into steps. So what are we going to do this week? Next week? How are you going to change? How are you going to help me change? Because if you're my supervisor, I'm your employee, we're a team.
Sure.
Most places don't have teams. They have groups of people that happen to work together Monday through Friday. But when it's imperative that my success is built on your success, then we start looking at it differently. Instead of employer-employee, it's what's our objective? Let's win the Super Bowl.
Right.
And we need both of us to do that, whether we like each other or not.
Well, you know what that comes down to is alignment. And I mean, strategy, again, strategy with a big S is, to me, what makes that hard is getting people all in the same boat, is the alignment of what everybody wants and needs to do their work really well. So in your opinion, what are good ways that a leader can ensure alignment among the troops?
Okay. One thing is, don't make too many objectives. Basic. If we've got 3 major objectives that we want to do organizationally, that's great. It's better to push 3 things 5 miles down the road than 100 things 3 inches down the road. Okay. Break those down to the department. If we've got 3 organizational goals, we might have 8 or 10 major departmental goals, and then you and I, as the people within those departments, what do you and I have to do each day to change that? And it's the conversations. So when the strategic plan is developed with the executive team, you present it to the staff, you know, in our department, but then we say, okay, what are we going to do differently? They have to help create it. I don't care how good the plan is. If we tell them, they're never going to buy it. So that's where we have to involve them in the conversation. How are we going to change? And give it to them as the challenge. This is what we have to do to change. And I need your help. And most great leaders know to ask their people for help. Instead of saying, I'm God, I know everything. Say, you know what, even if you know the answer, ask your people, because they're going to come up with great ideas. And those ideas and their initiative is going to be what's going to drive it after that 6-week barrier, after the fun wears off, and this isn't any fun anymore, and this is change, and I'm uncomfortable, and there's new processes. That's what's going to drive it, because you and I created it, and we want to be successful at what we create.
So here's a question for you. It kind of come to me as we're talking, is this idea that you're going to change. The company has to change. The organization has to change for some reason. And many times what's driving that is the company's not as successful as it wants to be. How do you impart the need to change, without alarming people? I mean, people are going to hear, we got to make all these changes. Oh my God, are we going out of business? Am I going to lose my job? You know, how do you assuage that fear, but also communicate, hey, it's fine. We have a plan. We're going to work this plan. It's going to be successful. We need your help, without alarming people. It's kind of a fine line, isn't it?
Yes and no. For most organizations, they don't have a very good communication structure, and they don't have much trust. So they're used to leadership saying one thing and then doing something else. Okay, there's 2 sets of rules, one for the king and one for the people, right? And so it comes down to, we need to start having some honest conversations. And change is happening all around us. We're just allowing it to happen to us. And what we want to do with a strategic plan is say, we're going to chart a course, and we're going to have some control over our lives. And the main thing we have to give to people, that's why we want to invite them in the conversation, so they have some control over their life, over this journey that we're going to take. And it comes down to some leaders, managers, employees getting past some of the lies that have been told, the fears, the masks, the things that we run into in the everyday world. But we really have to be honest about, do we want to achieve this? And if we do, then let's have those conversations and see it in people's eyes. They're going to say, oh yeah, we're fine. But if you see it, if you sense it, that's what you have to address, is the fear, and say, if you want to do this, let's do this. If you don't, we're going to be moving this organization in this direction, and we would love you to be part of it. Let's train, let's coach, let's develop, let's counsel in some cases. Some people are just fear of change because it comes down to, am I going to lose my job? No, you're not going to lose your job. If you can do these things, you might have to change your skills, but that's life. You know, we have to evolve, especially in this environment. I'm working with a client right now that because of things with the internet, their industry is changing monthly. So they're having to shift very quickly and doing it on the fly. And so addressing things quickly, making the adjustments, and then applying those and making sure that we're doing things differently today than we did yesterday, which will make the improvements that we need for tomorrow. And we need to measure those weekly, just like in grad school. You know, measure it weekly, have a plan, and you know, change those behaviors. And there's ways, there's steps to changing behaviors. There's steps of changing habits. And there's some good work out there that I've done, that other people have done, about how you do that. So plans are easy to make. 95% of the time they're not implemented properly, consistently, and behaviorally driven.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point, and really, Kelly, that's your bailiwick. Really, I think is organizational psychology. Kelly Graves has contributed now 3 articles to us on this topic, topics around this issue. And Kelly, it's always good stuff. Thank you for joining us. We'll have you back for your next article, I'm sure. We'll be talking about this going forward. So Kelly Graves, thanks for joining us today. Thank you as well, all of you, for being with us. Of course, I want to thank Rob Harrison of LNS Research. Remind you, of course, that Rob and Dirk are going to be putting together the webinar on this topic, EQMS Solution Selection, Best Practices for Global Enterprises. That's going to be this coming Tuesday, July 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So look out for your inbox for how to register for that, and check that out. It's going to be a good webinar. So thank you all for joining us again. Kelly, thanks for being here. We'll see you all next week for another full week of QDD, and Dirk and I will be back on the show next Friday here at QDL. So have a good weekend, and we'll see you later.